Hello, welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us. Today's our next to last day in the book of Isaiah as we do our chronological read through of the Bible. Isaiah begins chapter 59, which is the first chapter we're going to read today, by reminding us that God is not somehow diminished or unable to hear or save his people, but that Israel has fled from God by her iniquities, separating herself from God. Remember, Israel, or actually Judah at this point, is in captivity in Babylon, and the people are wondering, where have you gone, God? Why aren't you able to save us? Why can't you hear us? Well, God's telling them, I hear you just fine, and I can save you just fine, but you have run from me with your iniquities. And then the list of Israel's iniquity is long. She sins against God in every conceivable way. Therefore, justice is far from her because she's perverted it and she lives blind to her iniquities. Now, we need to think about that in ourselves as well. When, when we are blind to our sins, when we fail to confess them, we separate ourselves from God, just as Israel did, just as Judah did. The Lord Himself intervenes. He intervened in the case of Judah. He intervenes in our case as well. He acts to bring both justice and salvation to His people, ultimately through Christ, through Jesus. We can't do this on our own. So God has done it for us. So as we move from chapter 59 to chapter 60, we see what God has in store for his people, what God has in store for Israel, what God has in store for us for the sake of Christ. And as you read chapter 60, I mean, such wealth and prosperity is expressed there as, well, could only be imagined even by Solomon. This is a temporal way of expressing the eternal joy that we experience in the presence of God. Chapters 61 and 62 continue to expand on this theme. It goes on and on. The Messiah brings good news and everlasting joy to his people. God's people will be delivered from Babylon, to be sure, but the deliverance spoken of here goes far beyond that. Here we learn of our deliverance from sin, from everything that separates us from the goodness of God. No longer will we be called forsaken or desolate. Rather, we are God's delight. We won't be opposed or oppressed by our enemies, but will live in the protection and in the blessing of God. No enemy will be able to rob us of this salvation, for at the same time as we receive this salvation, the vengeance of God will be executed. The vengeance of God will execute judgment on those who are his enemies, those who oppose him. That's what really the first 6 verses of chapter 3 tell us. The Lord acts decisively, not only for our salvation, but also to execute judgment on every evil foe. And then verses 7 to 14 of chapter 63, well, they recall the exodus from Egypt. Uh, you know, God's people rebelled. They grieved him during that exodus. But God's mercy prevailed. He forgave them. He cared for them. He brought them to the land that he had promised, just as he does for us, for Jesus' sake. We grieve the Lord as well, just as Israel did. Yet he shows us his mercy and his steadfast love, just as he did them. Next time we get together, we'll pick up with our last reading from the book of Isaiah. We're going to begin with what's called the prayer of mercy that starts at verse 15 of chapter 3. So we're ending in the middle of chapter 63. We're ending in the middle of chapter 63. May God be with you, bless you. As always, I pray that these comments are helpful to you in understanding what you're reading.